Lumen Living presents Bedtime Thoughts with your girl, Dawn. I am so glad that God comforts us in our suffering. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 4 says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." I am so glad that God gives us the grace and mercy to be able to be delivered from those things that are hindering us. And when we overcome and we triumph over those things, we are able to be a help and a guide to those who are downtrodden and cast down by these things. It's time to have these conversations, guys, the hard ones. Welcome to another episode of Bedtime Thoughts. It's your girl, Dawn, and I'm here with my girl, Shelley. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, Dawn. It's nice to see you.
I know, it's been so long since we last saw each other. It's been, 2 or 3 years now?
It's been 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. So we have a really epic topic to talk about, and it's something both me and you have dealt with at the same time. We're talking about invisible sicknesses. One of the biggest things that tragically hits is when you go to the doctor because you know something's wrong, and the doctor tells you there's nothing wrong with you. How many times have you been to the doctor and that's happened?
Too many.
Before we get started, you want to share with the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Shelley. I live in High Point. I'm from High Point. I'm 30 years old. I'm in payroll accounting right now, although it's not what I want to do for a living, but it's fine for right now. And I have multiple disabilities and chronic invisible illnesses.
Yes. So, while we're going to talk about our topic, I just want to introduce our verse of scripture, which is Jeremiah chapter 8, verses 22. "Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is there not the health of the daughter of my people recovered?" I picked that scripture just because a lot of times in our minds we say, okay, we'll go to the doctor and then we're going to be recovered. And that's not been reality for the both of us. A lot of times going to the doctor and seemingly being told crazy, or being told that we're just out of our minds, or that it's just something we just don't know that's going on in our body. And I wanted you to come on the show to talk about your story, because I, for one, think that you're at the pinnacle of someone who, like me, who is still trying to figure out what's going on. But you had a diagnosis, and then that wasn't what it was, right?
Yeah, for a really long time. And then, the last time I saw you, I've probably been diagnosed with like 25 different things that I've had for a long time, but it was always discounted, or, oh, that's normal, or it'll go away, sort of thing. So my time that I spent on long-term disability was really to figure out, like, not just to take care of myself, but to also figure out, like, what is actually going on with me and how can I figure it out and learn how to handle it. So that's basically what I have been doing for the last 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so to dig through, let's start a little bit with your symptoms. I remember last time I seen you, like, it was unbearable to watch. I know you were like struggling at the computer to even sit up. So what kind of symptoms have you been dealing with since then?
So I'm gonna back up first, because I have had illnesses since I was less than 5 years old. So this is something I've lived with my entire life. when you're young and you grow up sick, it's really chaotic because I feel like you don't have the same experience as other kids. Mm-hmm. And that leads to a lot of like self-doubt and anxiety. And when other parts of your life kind of are connected to that, that's like your identity. Like you're known as the sick kid, you're known as, well, she can't do things like everybody else because her stomach is always messed up, things like that. Yeah. So that was just me starting out even as like a kid. When I got older and I got my period, it was just like, I felt like no one prepared me for what that was going to be like. Like, none of my friends were having to miss school. None of my friends were blacking out from their periods, things like that. I had my first ovarian cyst at the age of 13. So that's when I started. Yeah, that's when I started going to the gynecologist. So like from a very young age, it was like, here's what you're going to have to deal with. And they put me on the pill pretty quickly as a way to suppress the cysts from growing, because I would just have them left and right, and then they would rupture, which is like another thing that you never want to deal with. And then, the pill didn't really help that much, but it was just one of those things I was told to do. This was a gynecologist that my mom went to, my sister went to, so she was very well trusted. And as I got older, things just got worse and worse. Like I was always told, oh, you just have IBS. I was sick every single day. And then with other illnesses, I constantly felt like I was getting things like strep throat, pneumonia, bronchitis, I had mono really bad, and I actually almost died from an abscess tonsil. So like all of these things were happening at the same time, and I just felt like I was trying to survive. And some days that's all I feel like I can do now is just survive. I'm sure that you feel that way too. I didn't feel like I was at a place to figure things out. I did get to the point where they realized that I had celiac, so like I couldn't eat gluten anymore, I couldn't eat dairy anymore. So that did help, but that was like a small part of the picture. When I graduated college, I had my first episode of ending up in the hospital because of these, I'll call ovarian problems, because that's all I was told that they were. I'd gone to my gynecologist, I don't even know how many times, and I was always told, it's normal, you're just having ovarian or like ovulation pain, or your periods are just really bad. And it got to the point where like I couldn't even take the pill anymore because I just couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't tolerate any form. And so, for a couple of years, it was just kind of like trying to make sense of things I had dealt with for such a long time. I had just like physical pain since I was really young, and I just ignored it. I never told anybody about it. I thought it was normal. I didn't tell my mom, like, oh, hey, by the way, like, I didn't sleep last night because I was in so much pain. Like, I just never felt to tell her that.
Unfortunately, that becomes regular life. Waking up in pain, going to sleep in pain, and being in pain 24/7.
Right. And because I had stomach problems since I was so young, part of me did think, well, maybe it is IBS or whatever. But no one ever told me how connected GI problems and, menstrual problems are. Like, they're very interconnected. And so I had years where I just kind of was like shoving things to the side. Like, I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to deal with it, which is like the worst thing you can do. And then when we met at work and things had really taken a turn, I had already been in the hospital that year that I started that job. I want to say maybe 7 or 8 times for ruptured cysts, suspected blood clot from birth control. The next year they thought I had a seizure from birth control or a stroke. Like, it was just one thing after another. It felt like I could never catch my breath. And my quality of life was like, it was basically nothing at that point. Like, I just felt like I couldn't do anything. And all I was trying to do was get somebody to figure out what was going on. Like, that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
And it just felt like it was never going to happen. And then the next year I went on short-term disability and I came back, and, you know, I kind of had told myself, well, things will get better. And then they just immediately got worse. And I ended up, so the gynecologist I had been seeing since I was 13 years old, by this point I was 27. So I'd been seeing her for 14 years.
Yeah.
And I never really felt like she listened to me. I didn't feel heard by her. I didn't feel like she understood the gravity of what was happening to me. And she just always acted like she just didn't know. Like there was nothing that she could do to figure out what it was. And I remember there was one day where like I had like my second or third colonoscopy at this point in my life. Like they didn't find anything, and they said, you need to go back to your gynecologist because at this point, like the ball's in their court, we can't do anything. And I was just like, no, like I don't want to, because it just hasn't been going anywhere. And I had this appointment with her, and it turned out she had to go to the hospital to deliver a baby or something. And at first I was annoyed because I'm like, really? I really needed to see you. I ended up seeing a different doctor, and the first thing she asked me was, why have they never checked you for endometriosis? And I said, I don't know. She always told me I was too young. She told me I didn't have enough symptoms. She told me that, you know, the pain I had was normal, and that, you know, basically maybe you're just more sensitive than other people. And that was the end of the conversation. And I mean, that was the first thing that this other doctor said to me. And she said, well, I think that we need to schedule exploratory laparoscopic surgery, which is the only way to be diagnosed. And yes. It just felt like I didn't really know what to think at that time. And I'm like, okay. And it felt like maybe we were going to get somewhere. And I had done a little bit of looking online, and I was very lucky and fortunate to find someone that has endometriosis, and she has been someone that I'm still friends with today. And she really helped me through this whole process, because it's not straightforward. It's not like you have endometriosis and you go to your gynecologist and they'll fix everything. It's not like that at all, which is what I was hoping for. But it's not the case, because they're not generally trained in expert treatment of endometriosis. They have the like surface level knowledge usually of what it is and how to treat it, but we shouldn't be doing that for people with endometriosis. I had to learn the hard way. You need to go to an expert surgeon that they went to extra school for, to train in, I think it's called minimally invasive gynecological surgery, or MIGS. Those are the experts that, now, are they all the same? Probably not. But I've had four surgeries relating to my endometriosis since I was diagnosed in 2019. I think it was 2019. And 2 of those were by people that were trained in minimally invasive gynecological surgery. They're not, you know, as well dispersed as a normal gynecologist. Like, you have to seek them out. I've had to travel out of state for both of those surgeries. I went to Chattanooga for the first one for major surgery. And then last year I had to go to Charlottesville, Virginia. So there's not really anybody local here. I think there's one surgeon in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I wasn't able to get a hold of her. But I think the thing that frustrates me about endo is that it's not a straightforward disease. And if you don't know to do the research yourself and learn yourself what are the actual scientific facts, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble physically by just taking your doctor at their word and doing what they tell you, because they're not experts in that field. I know you know what I'm talking about, but it's like, after I had this surgery and she said, oh, you have endometriosis, and you have it on your ureters, which connects your bladder to your kidneys. But she said, there's nothing I can do about that. I can't remove that. Well, that's not true, because I did have it removed in Tennessee by one of the best surgeons in the country. And that's like kind of the cost benefit analysis of like having to go through all of that. Like, is it worth the payoff? I mean, and it was worth the payoff. I have permanent nerve damage from that surgery, not by anything that my surgeon did, but just because of how bad the endometriosis itself was. I hate to compare it to cancer, but it kind of, the way that how invasive it is, it really is similar. So there was so much at that point that they didn't have a choice about how much they took. So I have, like, the innervation is has been affected, and so my bladder and my bowels don't work properly anymore, and they don't work like a normal person's bladder and bowels do. Which that's something that, you know, I had to think about, like, was my quality of life worse before the surgery? Absolutely. And I had to do what was best for me at the time. But I think the thing that I worry about with endo is that I worry about those people that don't know that you don't have to take a depot shot or Lupron. Like, those drugs are so dangerous.
So dangerous.
If you look at the facts and you look at the actual, like, studies behind what those drugs do to women, it's really, really dangerous. And when I had my surgery, I mean, she was just like, oh, you have endo. I can't really do anything about it. Here's Lupron if you want to take it. That's all I can tell you to do. She told my doctor that, or my parents, that it would suppress any more endometriosis from growing, which is not true. There's no cure for endometriosis. It can be an aggressive disease. And even my parents, I had to convince them. I'm like, she's not telling the truth. Like, I'm not trying to be, like, funny or overstep my bounds, but, like, I really had to convince them, like, this is not the answer. This is not the way. And that, dealing with a new diagnosis on top of everything, I mean, it was a lot. And even after I had major surgery last year, I lost bladder function for 7 months. We thought it was never going to work again. So I think when you're diagnosed with something like this, it's a huge change in your identity. Because I don't know anybody else my age that had to use catheters or a cane or a walker or things like that. And I felt like I couldn't relate to anybody. And I feel like when you're diagnosed with anything, I mean, whether it's diabetes or, you know, MS or anything, they don't say, well, how are you feeling mentally about this? Or let's get you with a therapist. If I didn't start going to therapy again, I don't know where I would be right now. Like, I really, really don't. I think I had bad experiences with therapy when I was younger. But I was very lucky to find a therapist that works with people in my situation that are chronically ill. That I also have, like, medical PTSD, which is something I think is very tied to being chronically ill, and it's something that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of trauma from being in hospitals, being in surgery, even just the sounds of, like, machines, that can set me off sometimes. And just doctors in general, if they're just not listening to me, then I tend to just check out, because it's so much what I have been used to that it took a long time for me to get out of that. And I think that's a huge part of what I would tell anybody to do that is chronically ill, or even if you're just diagnosed with, I mean, really anything for the first time. I think that people have the tendency to just try to, like, pick up and move on. And I can tell you from experience, you can't do that, because it will come back and get you. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I mean, I felt like I broke down so many times last year just trying to wrap my head around the fact that like my life wasn't going how I thought it was, that, you know, they didn't know what was going to happen to me, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I mean, technically, I guess I still don't really know, but when you're living with something that doesn't have a timeline, like this is something I'm going to have for the rest of my life, and other diagnoses I have that are the same way, it feels really, I don't know, it feels like a requirement that you have to know, like, this is when I'm going to have to figure it out by, or this is how I know I have to deal with it. But I've been in DBT for like 5 months, and that's dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the skills that they teach you is radical acceptance. And I feel like that's something that's really, really, it's not, does it help me all the time? No. It doesn't help when I'm like really upset about, because I don't think you can ever fully just not have times where you're not upset about being chronically ill. But there are times where you do have to come to radical acceptance that this is my life. This is just who I am. And I think one of the only good things that's come of it is that it makes me want to help other people in my situation. Mm-hmm. I do want to go to nursing school, as crazy as that sounds, because I don't feel like there are a lot of people on that side that have been in my situation or your situation of being through. I mean, I had nurses all the time tell me, oh, you have endometriosis? Well, I had it, and they just did a hysterectomy and I was fine. Why don't you do that? And I'm like, that's not helpful. No. That's really not helpful. And then I have to be the ones to educate them. And then they come back and say, I didn't know that, you know, thanks for telling me. And that's really like what you have to do. It's not to be mean. It's not to put people in their place, but it is to say, you know, that's great that worked for you, but you know, that these are the scientific facts about what it actually is and how it actually works. And I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about, I mean, almost every medical condition. And I think the more that we can dispel those, the better. And the more awareness we spread is obviously the better. And I think being a nurse would allow me to do that, and also just to support people that have been through this, because it's really, really hard. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I feel like if I didn't have friends or people I know that have endo or have, you know, medical conditions that can relate to me, I don't think I could have gone through it by myself. And I just feel like that is something that needs to be focused on, the mental side of, I think that physical and mental illnesses are viewed as two different things and not intertwined. And that is, that's just, it's so like backwards to me, because your physical health has the utmost impact on your mental health and vice versa. And I just feel like it should go hand in hand with, well, here's some medication. Well, what about me dealing with the fact that, you know, I have arthritis at the age of 30 or whatever? Like, here are some support groups, like that would be helpful. Or find a community on Reddit or Facebook or Instagram. Those are the things that are helpful for people. You may not need to say, you know, vent about all of your symptoms. You may just need to find someone that gets it. I have a really good friend that has really, really bad endo, and she's someone that I just don't have to explain anything to. And I think that anybody in our position needs that. So
absolutely.
So that's basically what's been going on. And, you know, it's been really hard, but at the same time, I'm glad I know what's wrong with me. And there's it's a lot of different things, and it's hard to explain to people. And, you know, it has affected, I've had to make a lot of changes to my own life. Things that I've seen that have made me feel worse physically, I've had to just cut it out, no matter what it is. And that's something that's really hard, and change can be something that, you know, you're really afraid of, but it's been really worth it in the end. So I think, you know, I don't know, like I feel like I'm probably a completely different person the last time that I saw you and that we've spoken, because it's like going through metamorphosis is what it feels like. So yeah, that's what's been going on.
Most definitely. I think in a situation, it can be so difficult, and I found myself having to do this very thing last year at the beginning, was advocate for myself. It was so difficult when you would think that you had doctors on your side, that you had people in your corner that really understood, but then you realize no. Had to change my entire healthcare network, my doctor down to gynecologist, down to everybody that I thought was in my corner. I changed that entire team, and it changed the outcome of so many different things, because just like you said, it's so easy for them to label stomach issues on IBS. I've been diagnosed with IBS since I was early college, and I'm like, is that what you guys think?
Yeah, it's a blanket diagnosis.
A blanket diagnosis. And just like you had said, which I think is a big trigger for a lot of us women who go through stuff, is when the doctor says, oh, that's normal. Okay. Oh, this is normal, And so then you go into your friend groups and you're like, yeah, my blood clots are the size of $50. Is that normal for you guys? And they're like, no. What about golf balls? Towards day number 3, they're like, no, that's not normal for me either. Halfway dead, day number 2. Is that normal for you guys? No, that's not normal. And we're told this over and over again. Oh, that's normal. You'll be fine. That's normal. Or you'll get like a little questionable rash or something. It'll go away in a couple of days. And what happens when it comes back? Where's it coming from? What's it caused by? We have so many other questions, and then we get dismissed. And then I had to get to a point where I have to advocate for myself if I want to feel better about what's going on in my body, and not backing down when they're like, oh, it's nothing, So that's one of the things that this literally has taught us to be stronger, One of the questions I have for you is, what are a couple of the other diagnoses that you have been given?
So one thing that I guess is kind of interesting, I have a genetic condition, which I guess I should say I have always kind of suspected I had something. It's one of those things that I just think it's weird to me. I've had it my entire life and I've never known it, but I did see a geneticist, and it's called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And it basically means that your body produces connective or faulty connective tissue. So your connective tissue makes up everything in your body. So it can cause GI problems. I have the hypermobile type of EDS. I think there's either 11 or 12 different kinds. So I can dislocate my joints very easily or subluxate. I have a lot of hypermobility. So I have dislocated this shoulder, I think maybe 9 times. And I've subluxated a lot of joints. But it makes sense to me, like in my head, like looking back on my life, I'm like, okay, like that, I was always told, oh, you're just really flexible. And now it's like, no, that was because of this. But, I have really great doctors. I've been very lucky that I have in Greensboro that specialize in EDS, and they are just so knowledgeable and just so easy to work with that I'm super lucky to have them. That's been probably the second biggest diagnosis I've had besides endo. I would say the other biggest one, I have an inflammatory bladder condition that is tied to endometriosis, which is called interstitial cystitis. And it's when you basically just have all of these inflammatory cells in your bladder, and it can cause, like, I feel like here's another thing that people don't talk about with women is like bladder problems, because nobody wants to talk about it. And just like bowel problems, but like frequency, urgency, straining, things like that. That was something that at the height of like before I was diagnosed with endo, I would pee maybe 25 times a day, like no joke. Like just, and I'm not sitting here drinking like 2 liters of water, but I just, it was such a problem for me. And then when I lost function last year, of not being able to pee at all, that was something that, and that was just from the nerve damage I had during surgery, but that was something else that just, it's just, I just wasn't prepared for, I guess. And I guess I'm trying to think of what would be considered like a pertinent diagnosis. It's interesting to talk about. I guess I would say like one of the only things I haven't completely gotten an official name for. I do have inflammatory arthritis, but it's seronegative, so it doesn't show up in my blood, but it's considered like subclinical arthritis. So I can have eye inflammation, which is called iritis, and I have like, hot joints, swollen joints, it's just extreme arthritic pain sometimes. So I have all the clinical signs of it, but if I get a blood test done, it's like my levels are normal. So like my ANA, C-reactive protein, all of that stuff usually reads normal. There have been times when it's read abnormal, but they can never pin down, is it lupus? Is it RA? Is it psoriatic arthritis? Ankylosing spondylitis, blah, blah, blah. So right now it's just like seronegative inflammatory arthritis, which is frustrating, but I have doctors that know that it's there, and that's the important thing. So I was very like frustrated for a long time that I couldn't get it pinned down, but those conditions, like especially lupus, it can be really, really hard to get an official diagnosis for that. So I think the important thing is just having someone that knows it's there, and if you need prednisone, then you need to go on prednisone for a flare-up, and like that's it. That's the most important thing. So I would say those are the biggest ones that I've had, and then like lots of little ones that aren't as interesting.
Wow. So it's been a wild ride, huh?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
How often do you say you go to the doctor now?
Well, I just started working in October for the first time in 2.5 years, which has been, I'm going to call it interesting. I'm not going to say it's been perfect. It's definitely weird working now. I know this is not part of your question, but it's weird working now as opposed to before, because I am a completely different person, and I don't have a lot of patience for not being taken seriously, like as far as, saying that I'm having a problem right now. And when I don't get that taken seriously, then it does frustrate me, because I am like just vehemently standing up for myself now. And so when I'm doing that and I'm not being heard, then it's very, very aggravating for me. And I don't really like being in an environment where I don't feel like being a human being, like I don't feel like I'm really valued as much. And I'm sure you know what I mean by that. So that's been frustrating. But as far as doctor's appointments, before I started working again, I would say 6 to 7 appointments a week, sometimes more, depending on what do I have going on, things like that. I've been able to cut it down, which is good, but I would say probably close to 15 to 17 different physicians, and I have like 2 surgeons that I have to follow up with, but now it's maybe like 3 to 4 a week, and that's including like I have therapy every week, I have DBT for 2 hours every week. So basically I do at least 3 hours of that is for my mental health. And so I would say about 4 to 5 appointments, and I'm in physical therapy again, so that's another thing. But because of work, I've really had to like trim the fat, which is hard. And then other times I have to do the opposite where I'm like, this is non-negotiable, get over it, which is never fun.
Absolutely. You know, I know more than anything that balancing work and balancing illness is difficult. And then I had to take the approach of I have to do what's best for me. So, you know, you guys can take it or leave it type of situation.
Exactly.
You know, I was also doing physical therapy and mental therapy at the same time. So definitely know, like, I'm like, won't be in until such and such time. Have to leave early, you know, so I definitely tried my best to do what I could while I was there, you know, so I didn't feel like I was letting the company down or letting, you know, down my peers and colleagues, but at the same time, getting what I needed. So that's really good that you brought that up. Next, I just wanted to for us to dive into 5 pieces of advice you would give someone going through the same thing that you are going through right now.
I would say take care of your mental health is the absolute, like, most important piece of advice I can give you. I feel like even my entire life when I was sick, I just always felt like I had to hide it, or, I mean, even the last time that I had seen you, I was really self-conscious about it. I wouldn't tell other people. I knew that people thought I was faking it, and at work, and that was something that back then it really hurt me, but now I don't really care because I just don't care. But I do feel like you need someone to kind of field the, you know, ups and downs of living like this. And I had a complete breakdown at work yesterday because I've been having a lot of issues with my nerve damage. And I'm at a point right now where it's the worst it's affected my bowels basically since surgery. And I'm just really frustrated with work right now because I just feel like I'm not being heard, and it's kind of making me question, like, do I want to be in this environment where my mental and physical health as a human being is not being accounted for? Do I want to be somewhere where I don't feel like as a human being, like, I'm only valued at my work, I'm not valued at taking care of myself? And that's something that, like, I haven't even decided on right now, but those are the times that, like, I need my therapist, or I need the skills that I've learned in DBT, and things like that. So I would say that's absolutely the first thing, because no doctor is really going to tell you to do that when you're diagnosed with something. So that's my first piece of advice. I guess my second piece of advice would be learn about your conditions. Mm-hmm. Don't run from them, because I think that that's something that people can do where they're just like, oh, okay, well, it's nothing. I'm just going to either ignore it, or I'm going to do the bare minimum and not really care. There's a way to live with things without being consumed by them. And I think looking at the science and looking at, medical journals that are, cited properly and everything, and it's not just like healthline.com or WebMD, like, actually look at the sources of the things that you're reading, because that will prevent you from taking in knowledge that may not be true, or it might be fluffed up. And then also just so you have a better understanding of your condition. And I would say within that same piece of advice, like, do what you need to do. Like, one of the things I have to do for EDS is, like, I'm supposed to do small, like, considered safe exercise every day, because it makes it harder for my body to dislocate and stuff. And I do have days where I can't do that because there's other things going on with me. But I think as much as you can have kind of a point of reference of, like, if I can then this is what I should do. I think that that's really helpful too. I guess my other piece of advice that we talked about earlier, don't continue to go to a doctor that you do not trust. If your gut tells you there is something wrong, or I don't like the way that this doctor spoke to me or whatever. I had a situation last year with my bladder where I almost had a device implanted to stimulate my bladder for neurogenic bladder. And this is one of the best bladder surgeons in the country. And I had gone to him with a kidney infection, and he was super dismissive. He wouldn't test my urine, which if you've ever been to a urologist, that's like, it doesn't make, like, that's the first thing they do. Like, no matter what you're there for, like, they're going to test your pee, like, be prepared. So, and I was in so much pain, and all he wanted to talk about was the device and that it was new and that it was going to be great and blah, 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 blah. And it just hit me. I was like, he doesn't care. Like, he just wants me to have this surgery. And my mom felt the same way. And so I ended up seeing a different urologist that specializes in neurogenic bladder. And he is the person that got me weaned off of cathing. And my bladder basically went back to normal. So if I had not changed doctors, I would have had a surgery I didn't need. And I would have had a device implanted that at the time I did not need. So sometimes, like, we have to trust those gut feelings or those icky feelings of like, I don't like what's going on right now. I don't feel heard. I don't like how he's acting. Like, sometimes you have to act on those things. And I've had that happen a couple of times. And so I feel like you were talking about, you have to build your team of people and don't feel like, and the same thing with therapists, very, very important, because I feel like people will go to one therapist and they don't like them and then that's it. They won't try again. And you have to find your person. Like, there's no other way to say that with therapists. Like, my therapist is my person. Like, I would never go to anybody else. Like, I trust her more. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, but like, that's how you should feel about your therapist. Like, they're not your GP. I mean, I love my GP too, but like, you have to find someone that just gets you and helps you, and that's your person. So that's my on now. Number 3.
You're on number 4 now.
Am I? Okay, this is number 4. I guess here's my other thing that took me a really long time to figure out. That, like, when you're sick and maybe you can relate to this and you have a lot of physical problems, you may feel like doing things that are good for you or that feel good feels really out of reach, or like you shouldn't be doing it. That's something I struggled with a lot because I was in so much pain, or I was having a lot of like kind of mental discourse last year when I lost my bladder function. Also, my disability claim got denied like at the same time. So it was just a lot of like rejection and problems, and I didn't feel like I could really do anything. I was just so scared to do anything because I didn't want anything to get worse. And it's really easy to feel that way when you're in a similar situation to myself. But I would say that instead I would encourage people to like make a list of things that you can do when you're feeling really physically bad, and get that list out when you're having a flare-up or something, and say, well, there are sometimes I can't even read a book because it's just not like mentally like possible, but like just anything, like watching your favorite shows over and over again, or I don't know, like playing a video game that is soothing, or doodling, or really anything. And instead of just feeling like kind of like dread of like, well, I have to deal with this or this, but I think incorporating those things into your life, it kind of just makes things easier, even though things are really hard.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something I've had to learn. It has taken forever through DBT and therapy, is just like, you can kind of, I think in DBT, they call it like accumulating positive experiences. So like, even though things are really, really bad, I can still if I can go for a walk, like I try to go for a walk, or I can still read a book, or I can still do art or something that's even just a part of my day. Maybe the rest of my day was terrible, but like that part of my day was okay. And so that's something that has really helped me. My last piece of advice. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I guess my last piece of advice would be that at the end of the day, you know what's best for you. Nobody else can tell you that. So if someone says, I need you to work 7 hours of overtime this week, and you physically or mentally feel like you can't do it, then you can't do it. If you feel like you need to clock out at 1, you clock out at 1. Like if your body is telling you like I'm done, then you're done. This same thing happened to me last week, and this was a very busy time at work, as you know, and I had been working 11, 12 hours a day for like 3 or 4 days, which I shouldn't have done. And because I'm just very like into being accurate and working and helping people, because that's just how I am, and that clashes with the part of me that's like, no, take care of yourself. So sometimes I have to remind myself. So I got to learn the hard way that you can't do that. And you know what's best for yourself. If you know that a career is not best for your body or your mind, then it's not best for you. And even just like things in life, if you feel like you're being pushed into something that isn't right for you because of like a physical condition, or even if you mentally just don't want to, even if you have no condition, like you know what's best for yourself. And I truly believe that if we hone in on that, then we will make the best decisions for ourselves. So that's something that is, doesn't happen overnight, and there can be a lot of self-doubt and shame and guilt about standing up for ourselves, but that's kind of what you have to do. And no one can really teach you to do that. You kind of just have to do it. So
absolutely.
I guess that's my last piece of advice. I don't know.
Those are really great. Those are really great pieces of advice, especially a lot of them I've had to learn so recently to do. Choosing myself, there are a million jobs and only one you, so you have to choose you, even in the hardest of times, even when, okay, it's not the most convenient here at work, but,
right.
Gotta choose myself.
Exactly.
I'm just really glad that you came and opened up about what's going on in your life and in your body. There's so many people who watch this show who are, like facing a lot of these issues, and they're not at the best part, or they don't really know what to do. So I think this is very encouraging for those people. I think it's very encouraging for anyone who's going through a chronic illness and any multiple medical issues. It's one thing to have, something going on and feel by yourself, and then it's a whole other thing to know that there's a community of people who understand what it's like and who's going through the same thing. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
And I guess one last thing I kind of didn't touch on is that there's a lot of grief that is connected to being, diagnosed with even just one illness. Yeah. And I feel like when you are diagnosed with something, you're going to go through a grieving process, and nobody's going to tell you that, but it will happen. And it's not just a one and done thing. Like it will cycle around and around. And it's something that you need support through that. And that's just something like I'm putting out there because I was not prepared for the level of grief I dealt with. Mm-hmm. And, it's not fun, but it's just part of it. And I think that's just more reason to have a support system to be behind you to deal with that. So that's my additional piece of advice.
Yes, you are so right. You are so right. I find myself sometimes, I'm like, why am I crying? And I know why I'm crying, because I'm frustrated, and I just don't know how to, like control my emotions during a time, especially when I feel like I'm just at the end of my rope with it all.
Yep.
Especially on the days that you feel the most pain, or you feel the most, you feel like, okay, this is getting really hard. I was talking to my husband the other day, and I said, most of the time when I'm in pain, I don't say anything at all, because if it's like a level 5 or less, then that's just regular to me. I wake up in that kind of pain, so it doesn't bother me. And, so I started tapping on his leg about how, like, what each level feels like. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna. When I got to 10, I was like, I'm not gonna, knock you out. But that's what 10 is,
Right.
So I said, I don't really start saying anything to you until it's about a 7.5.
Right, because it doesn't phase us at that point, and your tolerance just keeps going up and up. And you're like, no, I don't need to take anything. Like, I'll wait until like I, am really bad off, and then maybe I'll take something. I don't know.
Right. That's exactly what I go through daily. I'm just like, yeah, because he's like, you could take medicine. You could just take some medicine. No. This is regular. So, yes, I totally understand. I totally agree. So we're gonna end off with some prayer, and then we're gonna take this episode off. Okay. Lord, I thank you for the day. I thank you for these friendships that you've given me, and it's strengthened our encouraging us within ourselves, Lord. Anything that elements we may have, the pains that we may feel, Lord, we know that by your stripes we are healed. And in Jesus' name, thank you for providing us with this feedback, for providing us with research, for the right mind to advocate for ourselves. Anyone that may be going through these things, help them and comfort them in this time, and raise them up and reveal to them that they can choose themselves, and that they can advocate for themselves, and that they can raise themselves and encourage themselves in you, Lord. And I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much, Shelley, once again for sharing with us. And this has been an amazing segment. So, guys, like I always say, it's time to have these conversations, the hard ones.